Mom argued, "You're remembering it wrong," then flinched when Grandma quietly said, "No, that's how it happened." Her hand froze halfway to the sugar bowl, spoon clinking against porcelain. The cheap overhead light buzzed above us, making the dust in the air look like static. We were all squeezed around my parents' dining table. Me, Mom, Dad, my younger brother, and Grandma at the end, small and neat in her cardigan like she'd been photoshopped into the scene. The remains of dinner sat between us. Congealing gravy, cold peas stuck to the serving spoon, a casserole dish already forming that dried cheese crust on the sides. My throat felt tight, like I'd swallowed something too big, and my palms were damp against the underside of my chair. It was a Sunday night, the first time Grandma had been over for dinner in months. She's 80 now and slower than she used to be, so mostly we go to her. But she'd insisted this time. "I want to see you all under one roof while I still can." And Mom had jumped on it, probably picturing some wholesome multi-generational bonding moment. I don't think anyone, including me, expected us to be talking about that night in front of her. I definitely didn't expect her to back me up. The conversation started innocently enough. We were doing the usual post-meal script. Dad complaining about the price of petrol, Mom sighing about how you can't say anything these days without offending someone. My brother scrolling on his phone under the table, chiming in just enough to avoid getting told off. Grandma asked about my job, and I mentioned carefully that I was still working part-time while I studied counseling. That's when Mom rolled her eyes and said, "Of course you are. Ever since therapy you think everything is trauma. You even dragged up that silly story about us locking you out like we were monsters." "It wasn't silly," I said, before I could stop myself. "I was 9. You locked me outside overnight." I swear you could feel the room tilt. The ticking wall clock seemed louder. Mom put her fork down a little too hard. Dad looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. Mom gave the kind of laugh that isn't really a laugh. "Here we go again," she said. "You're remembering it wrong. You always make it sound worse than it was." And then Grandma, who'd been quiet all evening, cleared her throat and said, "No, that's how it happened." I looked at her so fast my neck twinged. She was watching Mom, not me. Her lined face was calm, but her fingers were gripping her napkin like it was the only solid thing in the room. For a second, nobody moved. My brother actually looked up from his phone. Dad opened his mouth and closed it again. Mom's cheeks went blotchy red in patches, the way mine do when I'm cornered. "What are you talking about, Mom?" she said, too bright. "You weren't even there." "I was," Grandma said. "You called me that night, remember? You were panicking because the neighbors had threatened to report you. You asked me what to say if anyone came to the door. And just like that, the memory that's been living in my body for 21 years had a witness. I don't talk about that night much. When I told my therapist about it the first time, I laughed halfway through, because that's what I'd learned to do. It's not like I was homeless, I'd said. It was just the porch. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking when I described the cold concrete under my bare legs, and Laura had just looked at me and said, very gently, "You know that's not normal, right?" Here's what I remember. I was 9. It was July, so the air had that wet, bone-deep cold that gets under your clothes. We lived in this small brick house on a cul-de-sac, 3 bedrooms, brown carpet, always slightly smelling of damp and whatever Mom had cooked that week. That night, it was burnt sausages. We'd had a stupid argument, me and Mom, about homework, of all things. I didn't want to do my long division. She'd said I was lazy. I'd snapped and said, "You're always angry," which at 9 was the worst thing I could imagine saying. I remember her face going very still. "If I'm so terrible to be around," she'd said quietly, "you can go outside until you appreciate what you've got." I thought she meant like 5 minutes. Cool off. That was the usual pattern. So I stomped into the hallway, pulled my socks on extra loudly, grabbed my hoodie. "Leave the coat," she called. "You won't need it." I hesitated, then did what I was told. She opened the front door, gestured me out like a doorman, and then shut it behind me with a solid, final click. I heard the lock turn. For the first half hour or so, I sat on the front step, arms wrapped around my knees, watching my breath puff in front of me. I expected the door to open any minute. Didn't. The living room light stayed on. I could hear the TV through the wall, Dad's laughter at whatever show they watched every night at 7. I could smell the burnt sausages and onions through the draft under the door. I knocked after a while, then louder. I rang the doorbell 3 times. Nothing. At some point, one of our neighbors came out to put their bins away. Mrs. Cartwright. She gave me this confused look. No shoes, just socks, a t-shirt, shivering on the step, and asked, "Everything all right, love?" I opened my mouth to say no, to say my parents had locked me out. But loyalty and fear are twin siblings when you're 9. "I'm fine," I said. "Just playing." "Barefoot?" She'd frowned. Then she'd looked at our front window, where the TV light flickered, and something in her expression had shifted. "Do you want to sit in our place for a bit?" she'd asked. "I'm not allowed," I said automatically. She stared at me for a long second, then said, "If you get cold, you knock on my door. Okay?" I nodded. I never knocked. Instead, I sat there until my toes went numb. At some point, I curled up on the bit of step closest to the door because it felt slightly warmer there. I woke up for a second when Dad came home from late shift, headlights sweeping across the driveway, car door slamming, his heavy steps. Heard his voice, "Why is she out here?" And Mom's sharp whisper, "Keep your voice down, Jim, the neighbors will hear." And then the door opening, his hands under my arms, hauling me in. I remember the rush of heat hitting my skin. I remember Mom's voice, tight and angry, "See? See what you made us do. All because you couldn't just do your homework." And I remember Grandma coming over the next day, her lips pressed so thin they were almost invisible. She sent me to my room with a biscuit. Then the shouting started. I pressed my ear against my bedroom door and heard words like, "Overreacted" and "Call the department," and "Do you want them to take your children?" Mom crying, "I just wanted to scare her. She has to learn." That was it. No apology. Nobody ever, not once, said, "That was wrong. That won't happen again." It became one of those things we didn't talk about, filed away under her version of events, if it ever came up. Back at the dinner table, my hands were shaking now, but I kept them on my lap so no one could see. "I was 9, I said quietly. "It was winter. You locked me out in a t-shirt. All night." Mom shook her head so fast her hair brushed her cheeks. "It wasn't all night," she snapped. "Stop exaggerating. It was an hour, maybe, and you had a jacket." "No," Grandma said again, still in that same low, steady voice. "You told me the next day you'd forgotten about her. You and Jim fell asleep in front of the TV. When you let her in, her lips were blue. You were terrified the school would find out. I remember because I told you if you ever did something like that again, I'd call them myself." My heart did something weird at that, this lurch of gratitude and hurt. Grandma had threatened to protect me. Threatened. Not actually done it. But she'd at least seen it. Seen me. Mom stared at her like she was a stranger. "Why are you saying this now?" she demanded. "Because I'm tired," Grandma said. Her hand was still clenched around the napkin. "I'm tired of listening to you tell that child she's crazy when I was there, and I know she's not." "Oh, so you're both ganging up on me now?" Mom said, voice rising. "You too with your therapy and your hindsight. You think I wanted to lose control like that? I was overwhelmed. I had no help. You think you were easy. My name? You were always crying, always needy. There was the old script. I could recite it in my sleep. You were too sensitive. You were difficult. You made me do it. Laura told me once, children are not responsible for the maturity level of their parents." At the time, I'd nodded and written it down. Now I clung to it. "I was 9, I repeated. "I was a child. Even if I was the worst child in the world, you don't leave your kid outside all night as a lesson." Dad finally spoke up then. "Enough," he said, palms flat on the table. "We're not dragging the whole family through ancient history. It's done. She turned out fine." I laughed at that, a short, flat sound. I did not turn out fine, Dad, I said. I have panic attacks if I hear a key turning in a lock behind me. I sleep with my bedroom door open and a weighted blanket because my body doesn't know what safety feels like. That night lives in my nervous system whether you're bored of it or not. My brother was staring at me. I didn't know it was all night, he said quietly. He would have been 6 then. I realized he probably just thought I'd gone to bed early. I remember you asking where she was, Grandma told him. They told you she'd gone to sleep. Mom shoved her chair back, the legs screeching on the tile. This is unbelievable, she said, getting to her feet. You're all sitting here judging me for one mistake. One. As if I didn't spend my entire life working and cooking and cleaning and doing everything for you ungrateful. It wasn't one mistake. I cut in. My voice surprised me. It was steady now under the tremor. It was a pattern. That night is just the one that my brain stored as capital letters. There were others. The things you said. The way you threatened to throw me out when I cried. The way you told me if I ever told anyone outside the family, they'd put you in jail and it would be my fault. I never said that, she snapped. Yes, you did, Grandma said. In my kitchen 2 weeks later. You said, if she ever blabs about this, they'll take her away. You said it in front of her. I remember because I told you not to say that to a child. She looked at me then, her eyes suddenly very wet. I should have done more than tell you, she said. I am so sorry, love. I swallowed hard. I hadn't expected that either. An apology, even a small one. It landed somewhere deep and raw. Mom's face crumpled and hardened in rapid succession. You're making me out to be abusive, she said. You were, I said very gently. Not all the time, but sometimes, yes. That night, yes. I was doing my best, she whispered. I know, I said, and I meant it. That's the awful paradox. I do believe she was doing her best with what she had. It just wasn't enough. Her best still hurt me. That can be true at the same time. Your best wasn't good enough, Grandma added softer this time. That's what she's saying. Mom blinked, like someone had slapped her. You never said that back then, she said. I was afraid, Grandma said simply. Of you. Of him. She flicked her eyes toward Dad for the first time. You both had tempers. I raised you. Mom's name. I know where that temper came from. I didn't want another war in the family. So I told myself you'd calm down, you'd grow out of it. I was wrong. Dad scoffed. So now I'm the villain too, he muttered. You didn't stop her, Grandma said. You walked past that child on the step and went to bed. He bristled. I picked her up and brought her in. After I yelled at you on the phone, she said. After I told you to go check. You said, she'll come in when she's ready. That line hit me like a punch. I didn't remember that part. In my memory, Dad had seemed confused. Hearing that he'd known, that he'd chosen not to check until his mother pushed him, twisted something in my gut. The room felt too small, the air thick. I'm not saying this to destroy you, I said, looking between them. I'm saying it because I need you to stop telling me I made it up. You don't have to carry what you did the way I do. But you don't get to tell me it didn't happen. Mom sank back into her chair, deflated. For once, she was quiet. Okay, she said after a long moment. Her voice was tiny. Okay, it happened. Are you happy now? I exhaled. No, I said, but I feel less crazy. My brother reached under the table and squeezed my knee. It was a small gesture, but it grounded me more than anything else. We sat in that heavy silence for a while. The TV in the next room played some game show on low volume, the canned laughter drifting in like ghosts. Outside, a car drove past, headlights flashing briefly through the curtains. I don't know how to fix it, Mom said finally. She sounded lost in a way I'd never heard. I can't go back in time. I can't undo it. What do you want from me? It was a fair question, one I'd been turning over in therapy for months. I didn't want a groveling apology she didn't mean. I didn't want her to whip herself endlessly. I didn't, despite everything, want vengeance. I want you to stop defending it, I said. Stop saying it wasn't that bad. Or, I did my best every time I try to talk about it. Just say, that was wrong. I'm sorry. And then try not to do it again with the grandkids. With anyone. Grandma nodded, like she was co-signing my terms. Mom looked at me for a long time. Her eyes were shiny. I am sorry, she said. And this time there was no edge, no qualifier. I shouldn't have done that. I scared you. Waves of something I don't have a clean word for moved through me. It wasn't forgiveness, not immediately. It wasn't enough to erase sleepless nights or panic gasps when I wake up from dreams of locked doors. But it was something. A beginning, maybe. I'm sorry too, Grandma added, voice breaking, for not taking you home with me that night when I found out. I convinced myself it would make things worse. I should have put you first. I didn't. I'm so sorry, love. I wiped my eyes with the heel of my palm. Thank you, I said. My voice came out hoarse. Dad cleared his throat. I'm sorry I didn't check on you sooner, he muttered. It sounded dragged out of him, but it was there. I thought. His mouth twisted. I thought your mum had it handled. I should have known. It was clumsy, incomplete, but it was the most he'd ever said on the topic. I filed it away. The rest of the night was weird. There's no elegant way to transition from, hey, remember when you traumatized me? To, who wants dessert? But families are bizarrely skilled at slapping normalcy over open wounds. Mom brought out apple pie. Dad poured coffee. Nate put on a sitcom. We all watched, laughing a little too loudly at jokes that weren't that funny. When Grandma got up to leave, I walked her to the door. She took my hand in both of hers and squeezed, her skin papery and warm. I should have spoken sooner, she said quietly. I kept thinking there'd be a better time. There never is. So I said it now. I'm glad you did, I said. I thought maybe I made parts of it up. She shook her head. You didn't, she said. I remember you on that step. I see you there still some nights. I hope tonight helps you see yourself somewhere else. I swallowed. I don't know what happens now, I admitted. Now, she said. Now you go home. You make a cup of tea. You cry if you need to. And tomorrow you wake up and keep building a different life. That's all any of us can do. I hugged her, careful not to squeeze too hard. She smelled like lavender and something old-fashioned I can't name. Driving home later, the night outside my car felt less like a threat and more like a blanket. My mind replayed the dinner in loops. Mom's, you're remembering it wrong. Grandma's, no, that's how it happened. The way the room tilted when the past stepped into the present and refused to be gaslit away. I don't have a neat ending to this. My parents aren't suddenly healed. There will still be minimizing, I'm sure, and defensiveness, and the temptation to slide back into it wasn't that bad. I'll still have nights where my skin crawls at the sound of a lock turning. I'll still have days where I question my own memories. But now, there's this. An 80-year-old woman at the end of a table, finally saying, I saw it too. A tiny crack in the narrative that I was the problem, the dramatic one, the liar. Mom argued, you're remembering it wrong. Like she has my whole life. And for the first time, someone from her generation didn't let that be the final word. It doesn't fix everything. But it loosens something inside me that's been clenched for 21 years. And for tonight, that's enough.